something else goes wrong with that. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sala.
Good evening, everyone. It is so good to be here. And also just to kick off our eight-part series, inner wellness series. So Scarlett and I are really, really excited about this series. And more so for tonight is kind of like a foundation sort of class, right? That it's a good way to sort of build from here when it comes to like mental health. Sorry, did I lose a screen, Celie?
Stop.
Or no, it was your screen. You stopped sharing. Okay. All right. So before I introduce myself and kind of go into the class already, I'm gonna give this chance to my amazing colleague Scarlett just to introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sala. Greatly appreciate it. So Sala and I are really excited to do this again, just to reiterate, because we believe these classes are the basic foundation and to continue to empower our communities with this information that's usually not given out very freely. So we wanted to be the difference makers to give this information out. And so again, my name is Scarlett. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and I of Samoan and other Pacific Island descent. I've been in the counseling field for over 10 years. And I find it an honor, as Sala can agree with me, we find it an honor to be in these spaces with you all so that we can share this information. So that being said, Sala, I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Yes. So my name is Sala Afalava. I am a licensed mental health therapist. I'm excited to be doing this work. And I work out of my own private practice. So that just means I work for myself, and Scarlett as well. And doing these community classes starting last year and then going into this year. Like I said, it's really exciting for Scarlett and I. So tonight, just want to welcome everyone to our first class of what is psychotherapy. So I know that the term that everyone is pretty familiar with is therapy, right? But truly, when it comes to our field of mental health, it is psychotherapy, right? So that is kind of a shortened version of psychological therapies. So just wanted to point that out because I know that we push the classes like what is therapy because that's kind of what people hear all the time. You probably don't ever hear what is psychotherapy, right? You probably just hear what is therapy or therapy in general. That's what most of the community people hear. So just wanted to come because like sometimes like there's massage therapists, there's all different kinds of therapy, but specifically for mental health and what we do, it's psychotherapy. And that's kind of what tonight's class is all about. Just kind of, we really just want to be able to introduce our community to this and kind of provide like a really, really good understanding. Like we said, these classes are foundational. It's a foundation where we can build from as far as everything mental health. From here, if you were to have a good grasp on what psychotherapy is, what it entails, then you're able to kind of like navigate different areas within mental health or within getting these services. And that's kind of what we'll be touching in tonight. So what is
Absolutely.
psychotherapy? We
So
already
Sala,
talked about,
Before
oh,
you go further, just wanted to before Sala goes further, please ask your questions
yes,
throughout the presentation. That's what we are here for. We don't mind if you interrupt. We will answer. We will be monitoring the chats.
yes.
And so again, Celie, if you see some chat questions in the Facebook chat, please share that with us. And so, because we again wanted to make this a community conversation rather
Hmm.
than just us
That's
only
good.
sharing information.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for reminding us of that, Scarlett. Scarlett and I will talk for hours on this stuff. This is our jam, right? We love talking, so we
Mhm.
could just go on and on and on about this, right? But we're not here just so we can hear ourselves talk. We would really love to hear from the community, whoever's participating. Bring your questions, bring your comments, because this is what these classes are for, okay? Silly, did you wanted to say something, or I see you're unmuted.
No, sorry.
Okay. All right. So before we kind of move on as well, just kind of want to put this question out there, and hopefully we'll get some engagement. When it comes, like, what comes to your mind when you hear the words therapy or mental health? And we just want to open that up to everyone. Just want to, whatever comes to your mind, either you throw it in the chat or unmute yourself and just share with us some of those things that come to mind.
So just to start it off, what I'll say, before becoming into this field, I think one of the things that I always heard about with therapy and mental health is there was a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment, whether it was self or you were embarrassing the family. So those were definitely words that I would constantly hear about mental health, like or something is wrong with you. So those are some of the things I used to hear before coming into this field.
Yeah. Just want to give that space, that time for, if you want to throw it in the chat, like when you think, like what comes to your mind when you hear the words therapy or mental health? Some of the things that we've heard from the other classes, we've had people say, that this is a white person thing. We've heard people say in when we would run these classes that when they hear these words, they automatically think crazy, right? So these are just some of the things that come to their mind when they hear of the words therapy or mental health.
So some people in the chat had said, first word that comes to mind is broken. Another person had said mental health is not for Pacific Islanders.
Yes. We've
Mm-hmm.
heard it all. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it projects weakness. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we'll definitely be covering some of those things in tonight and throughout the series. And so and that again is one of the reasons why Sal and I wanted to talk about this with our communities, because it's very different when you see somebody who looks like you, who's open to talking about this versus someone who doesn't. And so a lot of the times, and Sal and I have talked about this before in other presentations, that this is one of the big reasons we decided to be in this field, because we didn't see people who look like us that we wanted to go and talk to. And we wanted to, again, to be the difference makers in our PI community about how you can, when you see somebody who looks like us, it makes it an easier conversation.
Yeah. And then more than likely, some of the things that probably pop up to your mind and you're not sharing, it's the same thing that everybody else is thinking. It's the same thing. Like we've heard these stories of like, oh, that's just not for me. It's not for me. Mental, like going to see somebody and talk to them about my problems, like therapy, not for me. Okay. So if any of those responses keep coming, just share them, Scarlett. I'm gonna go ahead and play your clip.
I think that you can talk about stress.
Okay.
Anxiety, you can talk about it, but mental, no.
They don't call that mental.
What do they say? Crazy?
Crazy.
They label you.
So if you talk about it, then you'll be labeled.
You'll be labeled. There's a mental person in your family, and no one is supposed to.
When I say the word mental health, what is the first word that comes to your head?
Embarrassment.
Okay. Embarrassment.
To the family.
To the family. If someone has a mental health issue, what's the first word?
I don't like saying it, but
no, do
they're a retard.
Okay.
But I don't
no,
know.
We just have to be honest here. Handicap, retard, yes.
I have no idea.
That's fine.
Seclusion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with what he said.
Which one?
Retard.
Okay.
I don't know how to.
It's really hard with the Pacific Islander community because we don't have words to describe what's depressing, what
the
bipolar
American
is.
Okay.
What they're all crazy.
That's the thing. When we came from Tonga, we only learn about stress and depression here.
Here in America.
Yeah.
And when the diabetes, if your sugar diabetes is low and you are sick, and in the island, they think you are crazy.
Yeah. So any thoughts about that video that maybe anybody want to share about, or that maybe just something that some of the participants said that stood out for you?
I think one of the words that he used, one of the gentlemen used when he said when he thinks about mental health, he thinks about seclusion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's interesting because sometimes, a lot of times, regardless of what community it is, they always think like, if you have a mental health challenge, that you're the only person who's going through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it feels isolating.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, some of that too kind of ties into what a lot of us are familiar with and in our own upbringings, where, you know, hey, whatever we're going through, whatever happens in our family kind of stays in our family,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like going outside of the family is almost um, taboo. Like it's got to stay within the family. So it just kind of secluding us in that way. But I also like what one of them said about how sometimes in our language, we don't have the words or the right vocabularies for these Western concepts, right? For these ideas of mental health. You know, we don't have those words in our language. So it's understandable why some of the you know perception of about mental health that's coming up for people, you know, like the first thing that comes to their mind, it makes sense that it's crazy, it's this, because it's foreign to us, right? So anyways, hopefully that video or that clip was helpful. I always enjoy watching that video because it's these are our people, these are our communities. You know, these are some of the elders in our communities, and just to be able to hear their perspective is really enlightening. So anyway, so for tonight, our agenda, we're going to go through, of course, really defining psychotherapy. We're going to talk about some of the benefits of therapy. We're going to talk about what this key importance in our field, which is this trust, this what we call therapeutic alliance. So it's a sacred trust in therapy between the therapist and the client. Really important. We're going to talk about the different types of therapy. And also, I'll also be including in here just a little bit of conversation on how I would approach my Samoan culture with therapy, like how I would explain this concept of therapy, this Western concept of therapy to my culture. So that's why I titled it Therapy Meets Culture. We're also going to be kind of learning about, like, because a lot of the times a lot of the our Pacific Islanders that I see that come in, they're not quite sure, like, you know, how to find a therapist, or they're not quite sure what the process looks like. So we get that a lot. And this class is pretty much like, we really just want to empower our communities to be able to, like, you know, leave these classes and know how to get in contact with a therapist, know how to find a therapist, and know that they have a lot of rights. They have a lot of they have a lot to be able to kind of like a lot of control in the process of looking for a therapist. So there's a lot of control there for them in the process. And a lot of the times they think like they don't have any control over that. They do. Okay, so and then of course, like ending it with just understanding some of your rights as a client or as a mental health consumer. Okay. All right. Again, the purpose of our class tonight is to inform, to empower, and Scarlett and I's heart is to be able to increase awareness in our communities, our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities, and just be able to really kind of grasp the importance of mental health and how to seek these services. So that's our kind of our goal. That's Scarlett and I's goal in these classes, is to just inform you. Like, we just want to give you information. We want you to be able to look at this information, assess for yourself, and be able to say, oh, okay, like now I know what I can do with this information. So we want to empower you to increase awareness around our field. Like, this is our field, right? So Scarlett, did you want to add anything to this one?
Just to continue to reiterate is, you know, even if this information that we're sharing is the one part of what we love about it, is that what we share with you all, you all be able to share with somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that's the point of why we enjoy this, because again, the more and more we empower you who attend, and then you can empower the individual who may be like, hey, who may be questioning or asking about therapy services.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so then what is psychotherapy? Psychotherapy is this interaction between, and this is important, the interaction between a licensed trained professional like Scarlett and I and a client, or sometimes a client is referred to as a patient, a family, a couple, or a group, right? It's this interaction that's between a licensed professional and a client, right? So, and a lot of the what's talked about in this, relationship, or what's talked about has a lot to do with, maybe what's going on in that client's mind, right? And of course, like your mind can be defined as your ability to think, to feel, to choose, right? So a lot of what people are bringing into therapy has a lot to do with what's going on in their mind, a lot to do with how they're thinking about things, how they're feeling about things, and maybe some of the actions that they've taken that maybe are not, or maybe have landed them in not good situations, to where they kind of need some help kind of figuring that out, right? So I really love this picture illustration right here, because it's kind of like, like a client comes in and they have like all these things that's going on in their mind, and they can't quite sort that out, right? Because a lot of time, if you guys know, when we ourselves are going through things, it's really, really hard to see past that, to see past whatever we're going through, right? So it's like you wake up in the morning and there's this thing right here, and that's it's on your mind. It's right here in front of you. You can't even see past that, right? So, and being able to see a therapist, there's this person that is remaining objective, that is non-judgmental, and is able to kind of assess your situation, what you're going through overall, and be able to just kind of untangle some of those things that's going on for you, right? And so many, these are, like I said, these are licensed professional. They've been trained in different techniques, in different ways. They've went to school for a long time, and Scarlett will tell you, to be able to sit there and give you their undivided attention and be able to help you kind of untangle some of those things. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add?
Yes, so just to add some of that, and so there's an event cheat sheet that will be sending out that is a summary of this presentation. And what you'll see on there is that we break down even what the letters behind a therapist's name mean. So you'll see LMFT, LCSW, LMHC. So all of that means, for LMFT means licensed marriage and family therapist, and then LMHC is licensed mental health counselor, and then LCSW is licensed clinical social worker. The other thing about with therapists is that everybody who becomes a licensed therapist, they are actually licensed by the state board and government. This is not just some license and certification that you can just get. Is actually, there's a rigorous study, graduate school, and hours that you have to do even after you graduate. Oh. And so it takes somebody to get licensed about 3 to 5 years. And so again, this is somebody again who is trained in it. For each different license, they have a different specialty in each license, and then we'll, which Sala will talk about in this presentation as well. So just know that also everybody who is a licensed therapist has a master's degree or a doctoral degree and up. So those are, because like I said, it's graduate school that you have to go to, because you're not actually allowed to go sit for a license or sit for the national test unless you have a graduate degree.
Yeah,
that's something like that.
Yep, and it's a good point, because like a lot of the time, some of the questions that we've gotten from community is, well, what's the difference between talking to my best friend and talking to a therapist? Like I could save myself some money and just talk to my best friend. What I can talk to, whoever it is, I can talk to whoever, and that's save me some money and talking to a therapist. There's a significant difference, okay? Like, what other than the credentials that Scarlett was talking about, these individuals are trained, are specifically trained to be able to, with different techniques, and there's so many different types of techniques that, and then depending on the specialty of a therapist, and they have certain techniques, interventions, trainings, that they'll be able to help you with. So yeah, because we get that question a lot. Is like, well, what's the difference between just, talking to my best friend about this? Like, there is a significant difference. Okay. So yes, any questions? Scarlett and I just want to make sure we give space to see if there's any questions on every slide that we go through, any comments or anything. Celia, if there's anything that's coming up on your end, please let us know.
Yeah, for sure. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, but I'm glad we're recording this. However, I don't know if this, yeah, whatever, I can just ask it. I mean, what's like a good price range? Like how much should someone pay for a mental health specialist?
Scarlett, did you want to take that one?
Yeah. So I think when we think about the price, we also have to think about what we're willing to invest in ourselves. And so, because we can't look at it, it's like, if I pay this, then I should get this certain type of treatment. And so you have to really think about, what do I need to invest in myself so that I continue to work what I need to work on. And so, because I don't want just to look at the cost and say like, oh, it's too much, I can't do that, because that means I'm not able to get the help that I need. And so really thinking about, or what are some different ways that you can achieve what you need to achieve in regards to seeking mental health services. Because the other part is like, you can utilize, if you don't want to, because if you're not wanting to pay out of pocket, is how do we utilize insurance and EAP services? How do we utilize services that that offer just complete sliding scale fees? So there's so many options that you have. But I think when it comes down to mental health therapy, or therapy, is just like, you have to think about, what is the investment I want to put into myself, and realize that you're actually worth the investment.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things too, where, just adding on to that, where it's like, we spend our money on the things that are important to us, right? Like, there are things where I will go to town in and I would just throw money down like it's nothing, right? Because like, I really want that. I think it's important. I need to, get that, whatever that is, right? So sometimes, like, in my experience, and some of the clients that have come my way, it's like they'll be all for it, but then when it comes down to that, to that price, which is, one, absolutely understandable. If you are not able to afford it, I am more than happy to be able to talk about different ways, because there are options. There's so many different options to be able to have those services available. But I think, like, a much more important question is, how important is this to you, right? How much is this whatever you're going through affecting you, that you're, willing to invest in being able to care for that, right? Like, so, and yeah, do we have a slide on the, we should add a slide for that, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think so. Part of like the thing that we're talking about in therapy also is that the skills that we are talking about is really life transformational skills. These are not skills that you use for the moment. These are literally skills you use for the entirety
You
of
can
your life.
share with family.
And you share with another, because a lot of what we're doing is unpacking what happened before, so that we can create something different for you moving forward. Vicky, go ahead.
Yeah. So my question is, we work with a lot of, because we're in the community, and we work with individuals, families, and how do you approach an individual that you feel that needs some, therapy in a way where it doesn't it is concerning in my point of view, but how do you approach it, and how do you tell your community member, maybe it's time that we can assist you? I don't know. That's something that we need to be trained on as, community navigators. And how do we approach it in a way where we're careful? Thank you.
So how I in particular would approach that, and because I've done it before, is it's like, I would ask them the question and be like, or just make a statement of like, I noticed some things are going on with you. Are you okay? Let them share what it is. It's like, Tell me what you think will help you.
Mhm.
And so if therapy is not one of those reasons, tell me what your thoughts on possibly doing therapy. Can that be one of your options? Does that
Thank
answer it,
you.
Vicky, for you?
Yes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, because what we want to do is we don't want to go to therapy, because
Right.
when we talk about, because what that does in that piece is like what I always talk about, we have to give an invitation to the conversation.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, how do we approach this? It's like, and you have them tell you what it is they think they need. And then it's just like, okay, can you, and then like I said, it's like, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on approaching therapy?
Right. So it's always wanting to, kind of put that choice back to that person or to that individual. So it's putting the choice back to them, right? It's almost like for you as maybe as a case manager, as a community navigator, you see the overall picture, right? It's like you can pinpoint like, oh my gosh, like this person got to go to therapy, like you can see the benefits of like this person going to therapy. But sometimes it is difficult for you to kind of come out and be like, hey, dude, I think you need to go to therapy, like, because you still maybe want to build rapport with that client or that person. So like what Scarlett was talking about, that's being able to put that decision back to the client. Maybe you can just start off with like kind of, hey, I'm noticing that this is what's going on, are you okay? Like what Scarlett was saying, like, do you need to talk to somebody, maybe a professional, kind of that way, and just kind of let them decide, let them make the decision, because then it makes them feel empowered in their own situation. It leaves
Okay.
them feeling like, okay, like, oh yeah, I decided to come to therapy,
Okay, let's go ahead and expand that a little bit. So how do you, as like for an individual who is going to the therapy for their first time, how do we prepare ourselves as an individual to go to their first meeting? Thanks.
So I would say that come prepared in regards to whatever questions you want to ask. And so because the therapy session is for you to come to the space so that you can talk about what you need. And I think it's one of the things you have to think about is just like, what am I needing from this individual who supposedly can help me? And so what are the things that I want to talk about? What is the thing that's bothering me the most? And so really coming is like saying like, I would like help with this. Because the other part, Vicky, what I was going to add on to that was that, and to encourage whoever the community member is to do a therapy consultation. And so Sal and I offer our own therapy consultations. And I always tell people, tell me what you want to work on. Tell me the questions that you have. And it's like I said, and it's no judgment, because it's like we've heard a lot of, we've seen a lot, we've heard a lot, we've experienced a lot in this therapy field. So I would say the stupidest question asked is the one that's unasked. So come in asking all the questions of whatever you want to ask, because that's what we are here for. So we can break down whatever stigmas, whatever you feel may be holding you back in regards to just entering the room of therapy.
Yep. And to add on to Scarlett also, I would say, for this individual that now we're able to get them to come to therapy, one way to prepare is I would suggest learning about therapy. And these classes, these community classes, is an amazing place to start, because even this class right here is talking about therapy. We are talking about therapy. We will be going over questions to ask a therapist, in that first meeting. So that's the whole, that's why I say like this class is like a foundational class. So even like just sending your client, like whenever we do these classes, like on what is therapy, sending them that link, like, hey, here's what it is. And they can join in and just listen, just be able to listen and take advantage of this is exactly what we're doing this. So learning about therapy also, if this person knows someone that's been to therapy, maybe connecting with that and with that other person and seeing what their experience was, or maybe even they can recommend a therapist that they were able to connect with, and maybe they had a good experience. If they had a bad experience, please don't recommend them, okay? But just be able to learn about therapy beforehand. These classes is an amazing place to start. And then also I would say just keep an open mind, especially if it's our community members, right? Like we all kind of have like a, you know, in our own cultural ways, like we're a bit hesitant, right? This is kind of a new avenue for us to kind of go into as far as like to get help, right? Now we get sick, we run to the doctor, a medical doctor, whatever it is, right? But when it comes to like, you know, things that you're going through and you're thinking about, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling a lot of anxiety, you know, we're a lot more hesitant to kind of, you know, seek help, right? So maybe just having conversations about how can you just be open to the idea of, you know, therapy, and then having that conversation with them. So, and as a way to kind of prepare also them for therapy.
Now, is as some of the work that you do also, um, uh, do you share like breathing techniques in certain situations where people come in and they're overwhelmed with anxiety, with fear, and they're just, you know, bawling and crying? I mean, you know, when people have different circumstances in their lives and they come into your space, you guys have a connection, but it's just like, you know, do you start with, you know, do you also teach like breathing techniques to these families to relax, and so that you can get some kind of, you know, connection with these families that come into your space? Thank you.
Absolutely. And so that's one of the things that, you know, we teach about is the importance of the skills that we had to learn through our trainings, and what is, and because it's like it's what's beneficial for the person in there. So for example, for a breathing technique, we have to introduce the idea, because that's a lot of what we have to do is introduce these different ideas of what can be helpful. And so it starts with like, what do you think will be helpful for you? So if somebody says to me, I actually need to slow down. Okay, what do you need to slow down? So it's just like I need to slow down my thought process. Then we talk about the skills to help slow down those thought processes. Actually, I need to slow down my breathing. And it's like, okay, what's the reason you're breathing quickly? So it's a lot of the training that we do. And it's just like then we teach them the skills of how to continue to slow down. Then how to like, okay, let's talk about what is, and because the other part was when people breathe fast, we talk about what's triggering that. So it's a lot of training that we have done to help them figure out, not just to give the skills, but we have to identify the reason that they're doing those things. Because in particularly what therapy essentially does, is supposed to do is help break negative behavioral patterns. That's what we want to continue to work on.
Yep.
I'm sorry, one more thing. Do they have to go through their regular family PCP before they get connected to you as a referral, or or they can just go directly to you if they need to have some space with you? Thank you.
They can go directly to us. And so people usually find out, and the reason why a lot of times they use the PCP is because that's when they're sharing certain symptoms with the PCP, that's when they'll try to connect them. But a lot of times people think they have to go through their PCP to get a referral. You don't. You can just go straight to whatever, whether it's Sala and I or another therapist, go straight to there.
Yep. And then later on in our slides, we will cover that, you know, just being able to like what are like how do you then find a therapist, right? And we did put, you know, kind of like going to see your PCP is kind of the first route that, like I said, like you get sick and everybody goes to the doctor, right? The medical doctor. And they're the ones that's going to be, of course, giving those assessments, connecting those dots, and also kind of making a referral for you to see a mental health specialist if that is what you are needing in that moment. So, but answers your question, no, they don't need to always go there, and we'll talk about that more as well.
So we have a question in the chat. And so the question was, one concern for Pacific Islanders is the trust on confidential information that one may want to share any words of encouragement or such. The fear of going to therapy as well as sharing confidential and sensitive information. And Pacific Islanders may not be able to have the confidence to share freely. So with that being said, anything that's shared in a therapy session, we can't share. So your pastor, your mom, your wife, your husband may call and be like, "Hey, what did Sala tell you in session?" And because we are bound by ethics and laws,
And we
Yes,
will go over that.
Yeah, we will go over that in this
Yes,
too. We are
amazing
not
question.
allowed to share. So
Yep.
great question. So we'll delve more into that. With that being said, so Stella, back to you.
Yep, we will definitely. And yes, you guys question are like, you guys are way ahead of our class now. You know, you guys are like skipping all of the slides and going to all the good stuff already. So really good questions. Yes, and we will cover that. We will cover all of that later on. So, but again, just want to bring it back to how we're defining psychotherapy, because I know it's a big word, right? And it's like, oh my gosh. And sometimes we've even had people like, you know, I hear the word psycho and I'm like thinking crazy. Like they associate that. There's such a negative connotation with that word that, you know, that's why the cycle dropped off and it's just therapy, right? But truly, if you understand the meaning of psychotherapy, it's not such a scary word, right? It's this big word that's there. It's this interaction. It's a relationship between a licensed professional and the client. And within this space, you know, there's a lot of changes that are made to address whatever the client is going through and whatever distresses that they're bringing into session. Okay, so all right, should I move on? Good. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, so some benefits of going to therapy is some of the good stuff, right? So psychotherapy can improve symptoms of depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar, you know, when it comes to, you know, other mental health disorders, therapy, in addition to medication, is beneficial depending on the client. It doesn't mean it's forced on everybody. But one of the benefits of therapy is it can improve the symptoms of all of those things that you guys see on the slide. It can help you to improve and develop your relationship skills. You know, I think about when we have couples come into to our sessions, and you know, maybe the couples is in conflict about something that they're going through, right? Whether that is infidelity, whether that is, you know, communication issues, whatever it is, but this conflict that they're going through, you have this person that's able to, again, like that picture that you guys saw from a previous slide, there's this therapist that's able to sort of facilitate the conversation and be able to untangle some of these things that the couple is experiencing as a unit, right? So it can help to improve the relationship in this marriage, in this relationship. It can improve behavioral challenges. Like sometimes, you know, when you hear people that are like maybe are alcoholics that just drink excessively, and sometimes like when they come to therapy, it's having to, well, why do you drink? You know, what is there an underlying cause behind that? That is maybe this drinking is a way that you're coping with whatever it is stressor that you're experiencing in your life, right? So, but drinking is your way of coping with it, and it's an unhealthy way of coping with it. And if this behavior of drinking is affecting, you know, your personal life, your family life, your work life, and you're like, man, it's causing issues in my family, it's causing issues in my life. Like, I need to get this thing under control, right? So then it's having to like, if coming into therapy, you're able to sort of uncover that with this therapist that you're working with, right? You're able to kind of, you know, dig a little bit deeper, kind of peel back the layers and be like, okay, well, what are the triggers that you know causes me to like just to cope in this way? What are some of the reasons behind the drinking? And then really be able to resolve some of those through this conversation, through this dialogue that you're having with the therapist, and through all of the skills, the different techniques that this professional is able to help you or to help facilitate the conversation. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Other benefits, as you guys can read, it helps development of skills for coping with daily life challenges and stress. So for an example I can think of for that is, you know, for someone that's always anxious, right? And then coming into therapy, you're able to, like, working with a therapist is able to give you some of those tools. Maybe it's like that deep breathing that Vicky was bringing up. Maybe it is CBT, where you're having to, like, well, how are you thinking about this situation that's making you anxious, right? Is there another way that we can restructure your thought process on, whatever it is the stressful situation is, right? And just be able to give you different ways to maybe look at what is going on in your life. Okay, so it gives you a lot of different ways to cope with those challenges and stressors that's coming up for you. And of course, as we know, because if we're not stressed, if we're able to lower, it helps with our, overall health, lowers our blood pressure, right? So there's a lot of research behind that, how lowering your stress and anxiety about things is able to help you overall with your physical health as well. Okay, so there's a lot of different benefits, and this is not by any means like an exhaustive list of benefits. There's so many different benefits to therapy, but these are just the only ones I can fit in this slide. Okay, any questions or comments or anything that anybody just want to add? Nope. All right. All right, so if you didn't know, there are different types of therapy. There's individual therapy, and individual therapy, it's just you, the client, and the therapist, right? Just you, the client, and then one client, you, the client, and the therapist. Group therapy, that can be a lot of different clients, maybe like, I don't know, depending on the kind of group too. Whatever, depending on the kind of group, that's about how many people are in that group. And then there's also the therapist that's able to facilitate conversations within that group. Some groups are focused on a specific thing, and some groups are just kind of open. There's also family therapy, which it can be like if the whole family is going through, maybe the whole family experienced a loss, then the whole family gets to go to therapy, and they're going to have a licensed trained professional there that's able to facilitate the conversation on, like, okay, so how is this disrupting the dynamic in the family? Like, whatever is going on, that's maybe disrupting the dynamic in the family, and it's causing the family distress, the family as a unit distress. This therapist is able to, like, okay, be able to hear from every member of the family and be able to kind of navigate conversations around that in this space as well. And then of course there's couples therapy, which is it's the couple and the therapist. And in this context too, it's not that, like, the client is not the wife, not the husband or whatnot. The client in that context is the couple, is the relationship, right? So that means the therapist in the couples therapy, the therapist would have the best interest of the couple relationship as a whole. It means the husband can't be over there whispering to the therapist, like, oh, by the way, I have a secret I haven't told my wife. Please don't tell my wife this. Like, no, there's going to be none of that. And the therapist is going to be making it clear in the beginning of therapy, like, hey, there can be no secrets between me and you. It's, if there's going to be a secret, everybody's going to know about it, right? So you can't, in the couple context, you can't disclose anything to the therapist that's like, oh, please don't tell my wife, please don't tell my husband about it. No, the couple is the client relationship. Okay. Scar, did you want to add anything to this slide?
Yes. So in addition to what Sala was saying, is that in each type of therapy, there are also people who specialize in certain trainings. So for example, if you are wanting somebody who works solely on a depression, solely who works on grief, solely who works on parenting, you can find in particular therapists who can do that, or you can ask them, I really want to work on parenting. How can you help me with that? Same thing with groups have certain types of that are specific. So there are grief groups, there are the groups that address depression, anxiety, sexual orientation, gender identity. There are just literally so many different types of groups. And And even like we talked about those different types, those different letters behind a therapist's name, each therapist has their own specific training. So for example, as a marriage and family therapist, I talk about a lot of family dynamics in individual therapy and in particularly in family therapy as well, which by the way, family therapy is very fun to me. I love it.
Yeah, and for family therapy, like it can be really anything that is disrupting that comes off as like it's a stressor for the family. Like for example, I worked with the family that had 4 young kids, all under the age of 13, and single mama. And I remember being able to like, I think what was going on was, you know, the kids just were not listening to mom. So mom just kind of needed some, you know, just kind of needed some like, how do I get these kids to listen? You know, it's causing me a lot of stress, you know, that kind of stuff. So most of the time what we were working with them on, or what I was working with them on, is being able to one, how can we build the connection between mom and the kids again, and kind of strengthening that. But if we were to break it down to mom's need, and that's the thing, because mom was involved with like, this is what I want out of therapy. These are my goals for therapy. Can you help me with this, right? So it could be as simple as being able to like help her, or help her create like a chore chart, you know, as a way to kind of keep her, you know, keep her, for her to be able to manage her schedule and the kids' schedule, and that would lessen the stress for her, right? So coming up with like, how can, so we all kind of gathered around, all kind of sat around the table, and me, mom, and the kids, and we're all kind of like, and having the kids get involved with coming up with like, okay, well, which chore would you prefer to do, you know? And so prefers to wash dishes instead of, you know, doing the laundry or getting the, so okay, well, you will do that on this day. And it became kind of like this fun thing where even the kids felt like they had something to do with it, you know, like they were part of the process. So even just having that, or creating that environment for this family to feel like, okay, all right, we're getting, you know, our dynamic back. We are working together as a team in this family, and kind of fostering that teamwork environment for them was fun to see. So yeah, just wanted to, that story kind of came up when you talked about your family situation. I was like, yeah, they can be very, very fun. They can be very, any questions on this slide? All right. Okay. I think I'm missing like a slide. It doesn't seem to, it didn't show up, but I'll just talk about it real quick in case it's not there. But before I talk about this slide, one of the slides that I have in there that's not showing up right now is building trust with the therapist. So being able to build the trust with it, that is really, really important. That's that therapeutic alliance that I mentioned in the beginning, where before, like as soon as this client is like, this is your first meeting, and you're sitting across from the client, from the therapist, right? The therapist's first goal in that initial meeting is to be able to build some kind of a rapport with you, some kind of an alliance with you. And that is really, really important. And so for you as a client, if that's your first time, this is your opportunity to be able to kind of also find out if this therapist will be a good fit for you. Right. And that means like, if you're talking to this therapist, you're trying to tell this therapist about what's going on with you and how, you know, and this therapist may be just sitting there, just kind of like, and maybe it's like looking around, like this therapist is not the one for you. Okay. Because every therapist's main goal in that initial session is to build rapport with you. They want to be able to align with you. They want to be able to have this alliance with you. And the reason why that is so important, like for us, and in our field, is because in this space, this is where people get vulnerable. This is where people are bringing in a lot of intimate, you know, things that they're going through, that other people don't get the privilege and the honor of hearing, right? So this space for us as licensed professional is really, really important. And so why it's all, like this therapeutic alliance that we're talking about is really, really key, and why it's important in our field. Scarlett, did you want to add to that one?
Yes, because it's in that when you're building the trust with the therapist, definitely also talk about confidentiality.
Yeah.
So in the therapy space, it's called limits of confidentiality. That everything that you share is absolutely kept private. The only time that we have to share something with someone is when you have thoughts about hurting yourself, harming someone else, or about any child abuse that you may inform us about, elder abuse or animal abuse.
Yeah.
So those are the only things that where we have a legal obligation that we have to inform the authorities. Other than that, like I said a little bit earlier, is that everything that you talk about is strictly confidential. And so you could be 10 years removed from seeing us as therapists. And if somebody comes back and say, hey, what did such and such talk about when they were in therapy with you? You can't say anything. So that's how strict that it's supposed to be, because part of what we also talk about is what I particularly inform my clients, because the PI community we end up being at a lot of the same events where I let them know, I'm just like, I will not say hi to you, but if you say hi to me out at a community event, I will respond back, but I will not hold a conversation with you, because a lot of people know what I do. And I always want to make sure that people don't think I'm talking about whatever it is, because it's kind of what our community is known for, unfortunately. But so I take, Sal and I take what we share in those sacred spaces very, very, it's very important to us, and we keep it very, very sacred.
Yes. And so that space or just being able to build that trust in therapy is really, really important. I can't even stress that enough as far as when it comes to the work that we do, because in that space between you and the therapist, this is a space where it's protected, right? It's a protected setting. It's protected legally, and it's protected in such a sacred way, because it's the only way for this to happen. It's the only way for you to be able to open up and be vulnerable, right? It's the only way for me to be able to help you, right? If this space is protected. So building the trust in with your therapist is important. Which also on the flip side of that, building trust also requires opening up, right? So as for you as the client, right? Somebody was saying, well, how can we prepare, for therapy? Like having that open mind, right? And being able to okay, maybe you're not ready to go deep into opening up about, all of the heavy stuff, but maybe you're just what are you ready to open up about, right? What are you okay with bringing forward to this complete stranger right now, just so that you can kind of build that trust and build that connection, that relationship, right? So again, building the trust and with your therapist is really important. It's important to us. So if ever you come across a therapist that just doesn't feel I don't know, I don't feel this therapist gets me. I don't feel this therapist is understanding, what I'm talking about, or she'll be able to help me. It's completely okay for you to be able to leave and find another therapist. It's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. Okay. Because and one thing I would share with my clients also is in that initial consult meeting, I just said, even if we are talking here today in this 30-minute initial consultation session, if you feel like I'm not a good fit for you, because you're like, man, Sala's good, but I don't know, she just talked way too much. And I don't know, I don't like that she just talks too much. That's fine. I even let them know, this is the initial consultation is where you get to see if I'll be a good fit for you as a therapist, right? Maybe you're trying to talk to me and get to know me, and I'm over here just kind of, checking my phone. Complete no. Okay. Any questions about that? Sorry, my slide for somehow maybe I don't know why it's not there. Anyhow, any questions so far on anything? Okay. All right, moving on. So psychotherapy meets culture. So this is a way, like I said, this is a slide where I try to kind of merge my own culture, and I'll be referring to the Samoan culture because I'm Samoan. So as I'm talking about this slide, I want you to just kind of think about, like, if you're not Samoan and you're of another ethnicity, just think about, what does this look like in your own culture, right? What would these concepts look like in your own culture? So if I were to introduce this concept of psychotherapy to my community, right, to my Samoan community, I would be talking to them about and explaining it in this way, where I'd say, psychotherapy, it considers with utmost importance the importance of conversations, or sacred conversations, right? And then I would also kind of, likened it to, in Samoan culture, these are talanoanga ta'ua, right? These are important conversation, or talanoanga mamalu, sacred conversations, right? And now if I was to talk to my community about that and just explain to them how this relationship between you and the therapist, like what goes on in this space are sacred conversations. That's what psychotherapy is, because it is sacred. These are things that are, revealed to me as a therapist that maybe nobody else knows about. These are intimate thoughts that you're having that you're not disclosing with anyone else but me as a therapist, right? So these are sacred, and we do not take that lightly, right? We don't take that lightly. So I would, kind of refer to them as, like, these are sacred psychotherapy. This Western concept of psychotherapy, in a way, kind of connects with our talanoanga mamalu. These are sacred conversations that we get to have with people. And in our culture, honor, like, there's so much honor in that, right? When I say these are honorable conversations that we're having about things that are going on with you, right? I would also kind of liken it to relational space. I talk a lot about, like, the therapeutic alliance, this space, this psychotherapy space between you and your therapist. I would liken that relational space, or that therapeutic alliance, I would liken it to what we call in Samoa va'afealoaloai, right? That's the relational space between people. And in Samoan, it could be, the va'afealoai between me and my brother, the va'afealo, which there's so much significance in va'afealoai alone, right? That I can liken it. Like, I take this Western concept of psychotherapy and relational space, and how much there's just a lot of sacredness in it, not only legally, because we're bound by law and we're going to go through that, but also in just what we do alone, because we consider it an honor to be able to be in that space with people. And so I would introduce this concept of psychotherapy and just kind of tie it into some of these familiar concepts in my Samoan culture, like va'afealoai, or explain psychotherapy in a way that means these are sacred conversations. These are talanoanga mamalu, right? So, like I said, for this slide particularly, I wanted to explain this to find a way to how I am tying in psychotherapy to my own culture. But if you're not, someone, that's totally fine. But I want you to see, what would this look like in your own culture? What would psychotherapy look like in your own culture? Like, what are some of those cultural aspects that you're like, oh, that now that you've defined psychotherapy, it kind of sounds like this in my culture, right? Because more than likely, that's what will be able to kind of open up that conversation to our communities that are maybe a lot more hesitant to this Western concept, but it gets them, right? Then once they hear that familiar language from our own native language, then they're like, ah, got it. Okay, that's what that is, right? Any questions on this slide or comments?
And just to continue to reemphasize what Salah's saying is, like, these are sacred conversations and relational spaces that the therapist does not share with someone else.
Yeah. And it's with psychotherapy, right? Psychotherapy is grounded in dialogue, conversation. Psychotherapy alone is grounded in dialogue. And that dialogue, it really kind of provides that supportive environment, that relational space, that va'afealoa'i, right? Va'afealoa'i, in the Psalm 1 concept. So it provides that like that supportive environment, which then it'll allow the client, it allow you as a client to be able to like talk openly with someone like me that is objective, non-judgmental, and that's neutral. And that's another difference between you talking to me and you talking to your BFF. Okay, that is another difference. Okay. So, because y'all know, there'll be times where you like open up to your BFF, and the next thing you know, your BFF like, look, dude, I'm tired of your stuff. Like, I'm tired of your drama. Like, go talk to somebody else. Your BFF be like, look, you be talking about this like forever. Like, I don't want to hear it, right? That happens. So, your therapist is not going to be able to do that. I mean, they'll probably kind of like gently in their own technique and their own way be able to challenge you, right, and how you're thinking about things, but they should always be able to like provide that non-judgmental space for you to be able to open up. Any questions? Or Scarlett, if you want to add anything. Okay, good. All right. All right, the fun stuff. So how do we find a mental health therapist? How do we find a mental health therapist? Well, I think Vicky had brought it up earlier, like, and she brought up, like, do we always go through our PCP? And we put connecting with your healthcare provider for a referral as like one of our top ones, because we understand and we know that when it comes to our communities, that's usually the first place they go to. Right. Like I said, they're more likely to go to a medical doctor than they would come see me, Scarlett, about depression, about anxiety, about anything. So, so we put that out there. That is, we're not, taking that out. Like, we're saying, yes, that is one of the ways you can find a therapist, is whatever provider that you see. And they give you that screening, either if whether or not they give you the screening, you can also just let them know, like, hey, I've been feeling down lately a lot and haven't been eating, whatever it is you've been feeling. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like, you're depressed. Would you like to talk to somebody? And then they'll give you a referral. That's one way. Another way that's very common and everybody knows about is utilizing your insurance company, right? Finding out from your insurance company, like usually if you have the app for your insurance or you're able to log on online for your insurance, you can, there's features in there where you're able to find different kinds of providers. Like whether it is a foot doctor, I've had to find a foot doctor because yes. Whether it's some kind of specific provider, even a mental health provider. So you're able to, if you go log into your insurance provider website or whatnot, you're able to find out, if you type in mental health provider near me or whatnot, then you have it'll give you a list of all of the providers that's maybe close to you, all of the mental health providers that are close to you that accept your insurance, right? So that's what we call in-network providers, okay? Utilizing your insurance. Now, if you find a therapist that is not in your network, maybe this therapist does not accept Cigna or it does not accept Aetna, right? Then and maybe they are able to reimburse you if you go outside of their network. You can still see a therapist if you want that's not in your network. This therapist would be able to provide documentation to you, what we call super bills. You can take that, it's almost like a receipt of your sessions. You can take that to Aetna or Cigna or whoever, and they'll be able to reimburse you if they have that in your policy. If they say, yes, go ahead, Celie, we can reimburse you up to $100 a session if you go outside of your network. So then you just submit that your therapists are well versed and they know all about this. Okay, so if you let them know, hey, can I get a super bill? They'll be able to give you that receipt and you can take it to your provider and you can file your claims that way, right? Another way to be able to find a mental health therapist is, if you're comfortable, ask a friend, ask a family member, ask whoever you feel safe with. I would say, because maybe you're like, I don't know if, no, whoever you're comfortable asking, be able to get that information from them. Maybe they can make a recommendation. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything?
No, keep going. Yeah, I'll add it in. Yeah.
Okay. And then also, like, I think Scarlett mentioned EAPs in the beginning of the I guess these are, some of the benefits for some of us. This is an option in your workplace, having those EAP programs. So you're able to, I think, also use that with the mental health provider. And then also contacting your local or national mental health organizations, either by phone or email. I think on that cheat sheet that I'm sure if you don't have it, let Sealy know, and he'll email that out to you. But there's a couple of websites that is listed on there, multiculturalcounselors.org. That is a directory for therapists of color. Okay, it's based here in Seattle, Washington. So you'll find you can go to that website and you're able to kind of filter down by you're able to filter down by ethnicity. So maybe you want to see a therapist who has Somalian background, then you click on that and you see if there's one that's listed in there. Say if you want to see a Samoan therapist, you'll see me and Scarlett. We're like the only ones there. That's it. But pretty much the multiculturalcounselors.org is a directory for mental health therapists here in Washington of color. Okay. I think another widely used one by therapists is Psychology Today. And that's a very, very common one. You can search in any state, any county, so many different ways that you're able to kind of filter your searches to zip code, who accepts my insurance, like please just let me know the therapists that accept Primera, and all of the therapists near you that accepts Primera will show up. So I believe the link to those websites are also included in your cheat sheet. Your cheat sheet is pretty much like bullet point summaries of everything we're going through tonight. Okay.
Yeah, so just a quick on the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, that's for short-term therapy. Those are absolutely free. So you get assigned a certain amount of therapy sessions. Some is 12, some is 4, some is none. You would just have to see what it says under because it should be listed under your insurance benefit. Don't know what the EAP, how many EAP sessions that you get, please speak to your HR rep at your job. The other thing I would say is, like, just to continue to expand on how to find a mental health therapist is to really know what you want. So when I was looking for my therapist, I was like, they had to have a certain license, a certain amount of years, had to be a woman, and particularly a woman of color. And there were certain things that I wanted them to address with me. And when I did my consultations with them, when I was looking for a therapist, I looked at, okay, can you help me with this? And if so, how are you going to help me with this? And then that's what Sala is going to talk about. It's like the questions to ask a therapist when you do these consultations.
Yes. Any questions on this slide? Questions, comments, maybe even sharing your own experiences of trying to find a mental health therapist. We welcome it all, and we want to make sure we give time for that. Okay. All right. Moving along. Questions to ask a therapist. So I think someone had brought up, like, okay, now that we're in there, like, what do we do, right? So these are just this is not, all of the questions, there's not an exhaustive list of all the questions that you should ask a therapist. These are just some that we're sharing with you. So some of them could be like, if you're sitting in there, you're like, and you're probably thinking, kind of going with the flow, right? And thinking like, man, I'm just here. I made it in here. Now what? Right? You got this stranger looking at you. You're like looking at them, right? You're like, okay, like, what do I do now? So these are some of the questions, you can that hopefully will kind of stir up some questions that you might truly want to ask, this person you're about to really be vulnerable with. Some of those questions like, how long have you been practicing? Can you tell me, your journey of like how you, because remember, it's almost like you're interviewing them for a job. You are interviewing them. Okay. So, and sometimes I'll even say that to my clients where it's like when I can tell that they're kind of feeling nervous, and they're coming there, they're like, oh my gosh, I can tell that they're kind of nervous to meet this complete stranger. And I'll just put them at ease and I'll just be like, you know what? Think of this as my job interview. And if you don't like me, it's okay. I will not get the job. It's all right. I just want to make sure that you get the right person for this job. And so, if anything, I'm the one that ought to be nervous here. Like I'm the one that's like, okay, I'm getting interviewed, right? So just know that going in there, it's going into seeing, a therapist. You don't have to, feel like, oh man, like I'm powerless. Like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. No, you can ask them questions. And these are just some of the questions that we would say like to ask, in that initial consultation meeting. So how long are the sessions? Because some therapists like 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes, that kind of stuff. I like these last questions where, well, what experience do you have in working with whatever it is that you're going through, whether that is anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment, ask that therapist because you're literally just saying, like, I want to know how you can help me with this. How do you think you can help me with this? What are your approaches? What are you going to do to help me with this? Right? And then they'll sit there and, those therapists, they're going to be ready to be able to explain to you, like, oh, yeah, I've worked with anxiety and, trauma, and this is my approach in working with trauma. This is what I start off with doing. We want to be, and they'll just be able to tell you their approach. And if it sounds like this therapist is maybe like, their approach is they're going to give you a lot of homework and you're like, man, I don't have the time of day to do no homework. I didn't come here to do homework. Then you're like, yeah, I don't know. This is not for me. It's okay. Find a different therapist, right? So these are just, again, some of the questions that you can use as an example of, what to ask your therapist in that first initial meeting. Okay. Any questions? Or Scarlett, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, part of like, just to continue to re-emphasize what Sala was saying is that this is your space. It is not the therapist's space. This is what you want to get out of it, not the therapist. And so it's in combination with you're collaborating with this therapist to help you with your life. They're not to be there to tell you what to do. If so, I'm just going to politely say, please run, find another therapist.
Run.
Yes, because again, it's one of those you have to. Again, it's one of those. It's for you, and even if a therapist is talking about, well, this is what I did in this situation, and then they just keep going talking about their own stuff. That's not therapy for you. You end up being, somehow the roles become switched, and so and then that's not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, run. Okay. If you go there and you're like sharing about, what you're going through, and maybe the therapist is just kind of like, well, you know what, this is what you need to do. You just need to listen. Okay. This is what I think you need to do. Right. No, that is not our role at all. Like we're not there to tell. And a lot of people think that's what we do, is that we tell clients what to do. Like we are there to be able to just to help you kind of sort things out. Help you kind of navigate through whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment, give you some tangible tools to be able to maybe get through the situation in those moments, but we're not going to make decisions for you. And I've had a lot of clients where they'll be like, please, Sala, just tell me what to do. What do you think I should? I'm like, you know yourself and your situation better than anyone else, even a therapist, right? A therapist is a resource. They are a tool. They're there for you to provide that space for you to be able to just help kind of sort out what's going on and how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what you're wanting to do with your situation. Okay, so these are just again, not an exhaustive list of questions to consider asking your therapist when you see them for that initial meeting. Okay.
So a question in the chat was, does Apple Health cover your therapy sessions, insurance, etc.? Kindly share any financial assistance as well. So for me in particular, I don't accept any insurance or Apple Health, and that's a long story because insurance is interesting. So
Yes.
towards the therapist. So Sal, if you want to.
Yeah, so it depends on the therapist. Like Scarlett saying, like, I also don't accept the insurances, any insurance, mainly, and I'll be honest, just for the reasons where, you know, a lot of the times the therapists are not being compensated enough for their time, right? So like, for example, if I'm charging, like, say, for example, like 160, that's an example. If I'm charging like 160, and some insurance will really try to lowball, you know, the therapist, and the therapists that are really wanting the client, and they'll be like, oh, no, we can cover like $60, you know, of that, you know, and they'll just, you know, so there's, and then also that's not even getting into the paperwork side of things, of filing the claims and getting kicked back and then having to, it's just so much work. And for individual you know, practitioners like Scarlett and I, where, you know, like I'm working for myself, Scarlett's working for herself, you know, and maybe later on when we grow our practices, we're able to, you know, get people on to do a lot more. Like, we just don't have that time to be able to file in claims and do a lot of the back office type of work that insurance requires, because they do require a lot of like our ducks to be in a row as far as paperwork is concerned. But there are therapists that do accept Apple Health insurance. So it just depends. Like I said, it depends on the therapist, or wherever you're looking at for therapist. Hopefully that addresses that. Okay. Let me know if there's any other questions. Again, what to look for in a therapist. And I think Scarlett touched on this a bit earlier. Look at the type of training that they received, you know, how long they've been practicing, what do they specialize in? Like, for example, if I'm coming in with OCD is very, very specific disorder, very specific. And a lot of the times you need that therapist that's been trained in being able to really work with clients that have OCD, right? And so, like I said, if I have OCD, I would be looking for a therapist that specializes in OCD. If I have eating disorder, I would be looking for a therapist that specializes in eating disorder, right? So sometimes, like that, for some people, it's like looking for the therapist that is able to specialize in those different areas. And then their approach, again, like what to look for, like there's that insurance provider part of it too, where, like, you know, depending on whether or not they accept your insurance. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything to this slide? Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. And then, of course, this is our Washington law in regards to individuals and your rights as a mental health consumer. This is not this is not all of it. This law is probably like 2 to 3 pages, right? So these are just some of the things that I put in the slide, where you need to know your rights, because you do have rights as a client, right? As a mental health consumer, you do have a right. And these are just some of it. You have the right to be treated with respect in that space. You have the right to be treated with dignity. You have the right to receive these therapeutic services without regard to race. So, you know, without regard to race, religion, any of that, right? So, yes, and I like the one of the last ones. You have the right to be able to participate, or you have the right to be able to request and receive copies of all of your mental health records. So if that is something that you're interested in, like, you should know that you can request. So if you see a therapist and you end up leaving and you're like, man, I just wonder what my diagnosis was. I wonder what, my therapist was kind of jotting down when we were talking in session. You have a right to be able to request those records from your therapist. Okay. Again, this is not all of it. If you want all of that list of your rights in accordance to the WAC, that is the WAC for you. You can just copy paste it in Google and you'll get it.
And the link is also on the cheat sheet as well.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And then of course HIPAA, right? So HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act. When you're using insurance, right? Like just knowing that like insurance companies is privy to your information, that you are kind of using. So you have the right again to or it gives you the right to your health information. Again, you have a right to get a copy of your information, make changes to it if you want to. So just know that with HIPAA, you have the right to get it, you have the right to check your information, and you have the right to be able to ask, like, okay, who all has seen my records? Whether that's your medical records or your mental health records. Like, who has seen it other than my insurance company? Who else has seen it? So you have that right to get it, check it, and know who has seen it. Okay. So of course, like I think this covers that piece where somebody was talking about, that confidentiality in the space, right? In the therapeutic space. Yes, we are licensed by the state, and all of these laws applies to us. We are essentially like, we are under the same scrutiny as medical doctors. Like we are under the same, rules, regulations. We are also considered healthcare providers. So everything that that you're trusting your doctor with, because that they are subject to a lot of the legal actions, if anything, the same with us. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything to that one?
Just to add, and particularly, it's a little bit different in therapy. You can actually say what you don't want to go in your therapy note.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, if somebody, because I've had somebody say to me, because they come in, they smoke weed, and they said, and I, because I informed them of their rights, they said, don't include that in my therapy record. I go, cool, moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
so
people
you have to say in that.
Yeah, and some people even like they won't use the insurance, or they'll choose not to use the insurance, and they'll just choose to do private pay because they don't want any diagnosis. They just want me to, like, okay, just what the issue is, help me work through it, right? But with insurance, that's another thing with insurance, is we must have a diagnosis in order for us to bill insurance. Okay. Again, like HIPAA, it's part of our it's part of our professional code. It is being able to, like, us being subject to HIPAA, being subject to anything. It's all of our ethical codes. Like we as healthcare providers are subject to all of that. Okay. Any questions? Comment. Good.
You're good in the chat.
Okie dokes. I think that was it. That was it for our class tonight. So if there are any questions, comments, let us know.
Yeah, and please, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or any comment, and if you don't want to do it in here, please shoot us shoot Celie an email, because Celie will email us the questions and we will definitely answer that. We'll follow it up at our next teaching. And so, like I said, because it's a lot of information to take in, but we want to try to break it down at the most basic of what it is, so that we can empower you all to have this information.
Yes.
Scarlett and Sella, thank you so much for that informative slides. While I was listening out, the thing that keeps rolling in my brain is like, do we even have therapy, the word therapy, in our Marshallese culture? Because my culture, we were never raised to like, you know, talk about our problems or, you know, have these sacred dialogues. Because usually when they say sacred, it only involves like the elders and the chiefs and chiefesses. So I'm like, because I reflect and I'm like, how, like, is it because our environment back home didn't really bring forth these tangible mental health symptoms? But then in this culture, there's, you know, I'm like, do we even have word for like depression? Because seriously, I'm really trying to figure out the medical terms and how to use it. And then I'm talking to my niece. She's part of our dialogue too. I'm like, I know back, you know, back home there is that healing process that we go through, and it's very strict. And I know that if you don't follow it to the T, it's like you're just gonna, it's not gonna work. Because I've personally experienced it with my own brother, this healing process that never really completed. But then he's on meds now. And if he's not on meds, then he hears voices. But before that, when he was, you know, walking the streets and talking to himself, we had to, you know, reach out back home and talk to our mom. And she came home. She came to Hawaii with the healing potion. And then after he drank them, the bottles, he slept for like one whole day. And then he became okay where he stopped walking and stopped talking to himself. And then but the healer did tell us, like, if he doesn't come home and complete the last steps, he's gonna be worse than what he is. And he did. He eventually went through his own chaos and had to go to jail because they couldn't understand why he did that. But now he's on Western meds, and he's never gonna go back to the culture way of healing because he missed this opportunity. But he's okay now, but he's on meds. And if he's not on meds, then he start hearing the voices again. But truly, as for me as a martialist, I'm really trying to figure out, how do I introduce this to a culture that doesn't talk to others except for like closing? So truly, and like I'm thinking myself, like, are we even ready? And if we're not, when are we going to be ready?
That's when you send them to us.
Yeah.
I mean, and CC, just for you know, to describe depression, and so what, and you know, especially in our PI cultures, is to, let's not even look at the word depression. You can describe it as extreme sadness.
Puromit, we say.
Exactly. And so, and when we talk about extreme sadness, is like, how long have you been feeling that? Because if it's something that is, because we all have moments of extreme sadness, but if we're feeling it frequently, then that's like, okay, let's talk about some different resources. Even if you want to do like, you know, cultural healing, because there's nothing wrong with that either. Because part of what Sal and I are talking about is we're not replacing cultural healing. We just want to add to it. We just want to use it as another avenue and another resource. And so, because a lot of times when people think of therapy, they think you have to replace what you're already doing. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying, can we add some more resources to what you need assistance with?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for sharing. We really appreciate that. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of our language, I know when it comes to like mental health and, you know, words like depression, like it doesn't, you know, really translate over into from our language into English. You know, I think about depression, and in Samoan, the best I could say in translating that is mafafonga mamafa, or if you literally take the translation of mafafonga mamafa, that word, literal translation to English, it means heavy thoughts, right? So it's sometimes like there's so much that goes into, you know, those heavy thoughts, you know, like Scarlett was talking about, like we all have heavy thoughts, you know, like we tend to have those, you know, every now and then. But the difference is the point where it becomes clinically significant is when those heavy thoughts becomes recurrent, is when those heavy thoughts start to disrupt your daily life functioning. That's when it's like, okay, time for a different intervention, right? Like when because like I said, we all get anxious. Anxiety is good. Like it's nothing wrong with anxiety, but we all get anxious. It's built into us. It's part of our fight or flight, biology. But the part where anxiety becomes an issue is when it starts to like become recurrent, and it kind of goes into that threshold of like you're starting to not be able to focus at work because you're so anxious. You're starting to you can't even get out of the house because you're so anxious. When it becomes clinical, that's what we would define it as. Like that's the significance is when something becomes clinically significant, that it interferes with your daily life functioning, right? That's when it kind of goes into more of the mental health area for us. So hopefully that's helpful. Great
conversation though.
Yes.
Beautiful conversation. So again, if you have more questions, I'm telling you, please ask.
I know.
If email, like I said, email it to Celie. Celie will get it back to us. You can definitely email us as well. And like I said, that's what we are here for, to answer the question, to kind of, again, to reduce whatever heaviness when it comes to wanting to seek therapy services.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you both for taking us down that road. I did have a lot of questions too, but yeah, I got my own problems. But remember, this is part 1 of an 8-part series. So I'm gonna put this on YouTube, and then we'll share it out, because again, as I mentioned, we had some technical difficulties on Facebook Live that we'll hopefully figure out the next time. But yeah, this was a good initial session. So thank you for those who participated and came. I will shoot you out the YouTube link so you can share with community. And as both Scarlett and Sala said, this is relevant for the BIPOC community in general. So I would encourage folks to, share it with your community members. And then we will see everybody in 2 weeks on February 21st. Thanks all.
Thank you, Celie.
Thanks, y'all. Bye, Celie.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.